Learn how to make a DIY felt gingerbread house that can be decorated with felt candy pieces over and over again. Please like this video and follow my channel. First, you need to cut out all of your felt pieces. So for the red one, I did a door that was 2 inches wide by 4 inches tall, and I wanted a red candy door. And make sure you cut out 2 pieces of felt, and they will be sewn together so that it is stronger than just 1 piece of felt. Then I cut a bunch of strips of red felt. I did it 1/4 of an inch wide, and this is the candy stripes, like the peppermint stripes that I add to the white felt to make it look like candy. So you need to cut a bunch of these. I think I cut about 16 of these little strips to make the candy stripes. For the white felt, I cut out 4 square windows, and they were 2 inches wide by 2 inches tall. And you have to cut 2 pieces of felt for each window. So I was doing 4 windows, but I cut 8 pieces of white felt. Then I used a small circle to cut a circle from the felt, and these are for the circle windows and the circle candy that you see a lot at Christmas time. So I cut 2 white circles per window. Then you need to cut a bunch of green strips of fabric green strips of felt that are 1/4 of an inch wide, and this is to create the green candy details on the circles. Next, you're going to cut the gingerbread house shape out of brown felt. You can find different colors of brown, whatever brown you choose that looks the most like gingerbread. I just happen to have this kind of light doughy color on hand, and so I decided to use that even though it's not as reddish as gingerbread is. So you need to cut 2 sides, and then the 2 sides that are kind of like a square rectangle that go up to the roof. And then for the front and the back of the house, that's where you get the shaping for the roof. So it's a square in the front with a triangle on the top. And I actually have a free pattern and the free measurements on my blog. I'm linking it to that in the description instead of trying to explain it over video, since it's not an easy measurement to do. Next, you're going to need to make you want your house to be very stiff. So you need to cut a piece of stiff interfacing for each gingerbread house piece. And I used a very stiff sew-in interfacing. It's what I had on hand, but it's very, very stiff. If you have fusible, you can use that instead, and that would work great. I just happen to have a sew-in interfacing that I used instead. Next, you need to cut out a piece of foam for each gingerbread house piece, and I chose to do a foam and interfacing. The interfacing makes it stiff, and the foam makes it kind of plushy and soft and helps it keep it shape. But then, if my kids accidentally sit on it, it will bounce back into place and it won't be crunched or anything. You won't worry about that. It helps that interfacing keep its shape and prevents wrinkles. So you need to cut a piece of foam for each gingerbread house piece. Then cut off 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from each side of the foam. I wanted the interfacing to go into the seam allowance to strengthen the felt, but the foam is too stiff and bulky, so I cut off 1/4 of an inch seam allowance off of each side. I did not sew the bottom of the house. I wanted it to easily fold up, and so the bottom is left open, and I did not cut the seam allowance off the bottom. My foam is actually a fusible foam and my interfacing is not. So I did the felt and then I did the foam and then I did the interfacing on top so that the foam could fuse between, create a little sandwich and fuse all the layers together. I found that the foam did not fuse very well to the felt, but it fused very well to the interfacing. It worked out fine because I went through and I sewed part of the pieces, which kept all of it together. Next, you get to create your own design and gingerbread house however you want. I used some cream tassels to have like icing on the top of the roof, and then I used white rickrack to create the shapes for the windows and the doors. And I like to create the shape of the candy that I'm going to make out of the felt. So I made, windows that were circles and squares, and they're about the same shape and size of the candy pieces that I'm going to make. And I kind of put them all around the house in different places. You could add rickrack to all the edges and corners. I added rickrack across where the roof ends and the wall starts. It's really up to you how you want to decorate and personalize your gingerbread house. You can make it look like your actual house. Once I have it all sewn on, I trim all of the threads, and when I'm sewing the rickrack on, that's how I got my 3 layers to stay together and to be secure in place, since the fusing didn't work so well. But make sure you trim all the threads and make the house look nice. Next, you're going to create your little candy pieces. So you need 2 layers of the base of your white pieces. So I have, my 2 pieces of felt right on top of each other, my 2 pieces of my door right on top of each other. And you can customize your candy pieces however you want. I decided for my circle to do green stripes on it, and then for my squares I decided to do the red stripes, and I did 8 green stripes and 6 red stripes. And I kind of did a rotating design. This is the fun part where you can create the candy however you want it to be. So you need to sew across each stripe to secure it to the base. And then I went around and I trimmed all of the excess pieces. And this is where I trimmed all the threads too. I found it was easier to trim after you sew it instead of before, so you're not worrying about any of the stripes moving or shifting. And then, you can see some of the white around the edge. On the door, I decided to add 2 green stripes that are vertical. Then the last part is that you need to sew the house together. So first, with right sides together, you're going to sew the top of the house together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can see that my tassels are kind of poking out and that seam is sewn. And then you get to sew the front and the back of the house. And this is the part where you're sewing straight seams, but then when you get to those curves and that point at the top, you kind of have to be careful and go slow. Once it's sewn with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you can trim off those points and any of the foam or interfacing that's in the way. Then once you're done trimming everything, you can turn it right side out so that you can see what your house looks like. Color is kind of more like a graham cracker house instead of a gingerbread house, which sometimes we do graham crackers instead of gingerbreads. You can see that my tassels kind of stick up, but once I ironed it, that it stays down and it looks like, when you have the icing hanging down on your gingerbread house. Then you get to put the candy pieces on the windows and on the door, and I found that the felt stayed on without any Velcro, and it is really fun for your kids to play with. My kids have been creating their gingerbread house over and over again with the candy pieces. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I can't wait to see all of the gingerbread houses that you make.